My parents blamed an innocent woman for the death of my best friend, then manipulated me into harassing her for years, until I noticed something that made me dig deeper. That's how I discovered my parents' darkest secret and changed all our lives forever. I was 13 when my best friend Louis drowned in the village lake. He was one of 3 boys that died, all under the care of Salem. Salem was the local elderly lady, always glued to her rocking chair, had a black cat, and most importantly, her grandson was in the lake that day, and he was the only one who survived. How convenient, I thought to myself. And when I asked my parents how that happened, they told me something that changed how I saw things forever. Salem is a witch, they exclaimed in unison. They went on to explain that they'd seen Salem hosting witch practices late at night, and she had sacrificed the other kids in the name of saving her grandson. Well, in the eyes of 13-year-old me, blinded by sudden grief and depression, this explanation made sense. So from there, me and the other kids in the neighborhood made it our mission to make her life a living hell. We'd leave brown bags filled with dog poop and set them on fire so she'd have to stomp them out, destroyed her garden with the strongest herbicides, screamed witch at her in public. But for some reason, she never fought back. Heck, she never even looked angry. Whenever we locked eyes while she went to collect her post, they were filled with pity, forgiveness. So we upped our game, not towards her grandson, only towards Salem. To us, her grandson was another victim who never chose to be related to Salem. When the community found out what she had done, they joined us. The local stores refused to let her purchase anything. The mail carrier dropped off all her postage in the middle of the road. The police refused to help her when she asked for help regaining peace. And because all of the taxi and bus services refused her entry, she was practically stranded. It was around this time that I began to notice something. Every time I went to visit Louise's grave, there were fresh flowers and candles that were never there for longer than 2 days. And I knew everyone in the village was too heartbroken to visit. Covering each of them was a piece of white lace, something Salem always wore. That's when I started to pay attention to her, not in a revenge way, but in a fresh start kind of way. What I saw broke my heart. She had replaced her garden with rows of plant pots filled with sunflowers, Louise's favorite. And turns out it wasn't just Louis' grave that was constantly topped up with ornaments. It was the other boys too, all doused with white lace and their favorite candy. The whole time I never mentioned it to my parents, mainly because I didn't want to get caught for accidentally siding with the bad guy. But it was like I was given clarity. Every day before my friends went to Salem's house to harass her, my parents were the ones to equip them with everything they needed. And sometimes when they didn't feel like going, my parents would encourage me to motivate them. But then came my breaking point. We were all sitting at the kitchen table when I announced, "Mom, Dad, I don't think it's Salem's fault that Louis and his friends drowned." My mom's fork clattered onto her plate. Her face went white, then red, then purple. "What did you just say?" she asked, voice shaking. "So now you're siding with a color? What's next? You want to kiss her and have her babies?" My dad chimed in. I stared at them in disbelief. "I just think she's in a lot of pain too." "Oh, and we're not?" my mom interrupted. "You know exactly who Louis was to us. He was like a second son. Not a day goes by where me and your father don't think about what a bright future he had ahead of him." By this point, she was in tears, while my dad's hand rested on her lower back for comfort. I knew there was too much emotion for either of them to rationally process what I was saying, so I retreated to my room without saying a word. I lay in bed, just staring at the rotating ceiling fan and Louise's picture frame in the corner. The more I thought about it, the clearer everything became. The last time I saw Louis, he was at our house, getting ready to leave for the lake. "I'm not sure I want to go swimming today. It's pretty cold," he said, while throwing on hoodie after hoodie over his neck. "Son, there's a lot of things I never wanted to do, and that left me with nothing but a heart full of regret," my dad advised. "Well, I'm definitely not going, and I know Neil, Salem's grandson, isn't getting in the water either," I responded. "Well, Neil's a little bitch," my mom said while laughing. "Louis, you are getting in that water." Louis dramatically flopped over and sighed before agreeing to what they said. "Okay, fine. You're right. I'll make sure all of us get in." Those were his final words before leaving our home. The grief had blocked out that part. I guess it was just easier to be angry. But now the grief had subsided, and I knew the whole thing was my parents' fault. They were blaming Salem to cope. I knew I had a decision to make, one that would not only change my life, but also the lives of Salem and Louis forever. The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to do something. Salem had been suffering for years because of our cruelty, and she'd never once retaliated. She just kept tending to those graves, honoring the boys we'd lost, including Louis. I waited until my parents left for work, then grabbed a basket from the pantry. I filled it with bread, milk, eggs, and some of the cookies my mom had baked yesterday. My hands shook as I wrapped everything in a cloth. This wasn't much, but it was a start. The walk to Salem's house felt longer than usual. Every neighbor I passed seemed to watch me with suspicious eyes. Mrs. Henderson actually stepped out onto her porch when she saw which direction I was heading. Salem's house looked worse than I remembered. The paint was peeling, her mailbox hung crooked, and the remnants of our destroyed garden lay scattered across her yard. Only the sunflower pots remained intact, lined up neatly along her porch railing. I set the basket on her doorstep and knocked 3 times before running to hide behind the oak tree across the street. My heart pounded as I watched her door slowly open. Salem emerged, her white white lace shawl draped over thin shoulders. She looked at the basket, then glanced around the empty street. For a moment, I thought she spotted me, but she simply picked up the basket and went back inside. I did this every night for a week. Each time, I'd leave groceries or supplies on her porch after dark. Sometimes I'd include a note saying, "I'm sorry," but never signed my name. On the seventh night, everything changed. I was creeping up her porch steps when a bright light suddenly flooded the area. My parents had installed a Ring doorbell camera without telling me. The footage would go straight to their phones. I dropped the bag of groceries and ran, but it was too late. By the time I got home, they were waiting in the living room. My mom held her phone up, showing me caught perfectly in the camera's view. "Explain yourself," my dad said, his voice dangerously quiet. "She needs food. The stores won't sell to her because of what we've done." My mom stood up so fast her coffee mug tipped over. "What we've done? That woman called Lewis." "No, she didn't. She tried to save them. I've seen her at their graves every single day. Would a killer do that?" My dad grabbed my phone from the counter. "You're grounded, indefinitely. No phone, no friends, no leaving this house except for school. That's not fair." "Fair?" My mom's voice cracked. "Was it fair when Louis drowned? Was it fair when that witch let him die while saving her own grandson?" They sent me to my room, and I heard them adding extra locks to the doors downstairs. But I couldn't stop thinking about Salem, alone in that house with no one to help her. 3 days into my grounding, I made a decision. My bedroom window had always been tricky, but I'd figured out years ago how to open it without making noise. I waited until midnight, then carefully climbed out onto the roof. The drop to the ground was only about 8 feet, and I landed softly in the flower bed below. Salem's house was dark, except for a single candle in the front window. I knocked quietly on her door, half expecting her to refuse to answer, but she opened it immediately, as if she'd been waiting. "I knew it was you leaving the food," she said softly. Her voice was nothing like I'd imagined. It was warm, kind even. "I'm sorry for everything we did to you." She stepped aside to let me in. Her house smelled like lavender and old books. Photos covered every surface, including several of the 3 boys who'd drowned. In the center sat a picture of Louis grinning at the camera, a sunflower tucked behind his ear. "Sit," she said, gesturing to a worn armchair. "I have something to show you." She pulled out an old tablet and opened a video file. My grandson Neil recorded this on his phone that day at the lake. I've tried showing it to people, but no one would look. The video was shaky, but clear enough. I saw the boys playing by the lake's edge, Lewis hanging back like he'd said he would. Then I saw something that made my blood run cold. Warning signs reading, "Danger, thin ice," were clearly visible around the lake. But in the video, I watched as several adults, their faces familiar but unclear, tore down the signs. "Those signs were put up by the city that morning," Salem said quietly. "The ice was too thin after the early thaw, but some parents thought the signs were ruining the children's fun." The video continued. I watched Salem running toward the lake, screaming warnings. I saw her dive into the freezing water again and again, pulling out boy after boy. She saved Neil first, yes, but then immediately went back for the others. The video showed her dragging Lewis to shore, pumping his chest, breathing into his lungs while other adults stood frozen in shock. "I tried everything," she whispered, "but the water was too cold. They'd been under too long." I felt sick. "Why didn't you show this to the police?" "I tried, but the parents who tore down the signs included the police chief's brother. They destroyed the official report, said I must have removed the signs myself to make the accident happen." We sat in silence for a moment before she spoke again. "Your parents were there that day. They weren't the ones who removed the signs, but they saw who did. They've been living with that guilt ever since." The walk home felt like a dream. I climbed back through my window, my mind racing with everything I'd learned. But when I pushed open my bedroom door, my parents were standing there waiting. My room was destroyed. Every photo of Louis had been torn from the walls. His soccer trophy was smashed, and his favorite book that I'd kept was ripped to pieces. On my bed lay a note in my mother's handwriting. "If you love that witch so much, go live with her. We know where you went," my dad said. "The Ring camera alerts us when you leave too." She showed me the video, the real video of what happened that day. My mom laughed, but it sounded more like a sob. "There is no video. She's manipulating you. Can't you see that?" "Mom, I saw it. The warning signs were torn down. That's why the boys fell through the ice." "Enough!" My dad's shout made me jump. "You're clearly too far gone. We're going to fix this." That's when Tyler walked in, my older brother who was supposed to be away at college. He looked tired, older somehow. "I've been home for weeks," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Mom and Dad asked me to come back to help monitor you. You've been getting worse and we're all worried." "Monitor me? I'm not some criminal." "No," Tyler said, "but you're defending one. And that ends now. I think it's time we consider that wilderness camp for troubled teens I told you about, Mom." My parents nodded in agreement. They left my room, but not before my dad removed the window handles. "For your own safety," he said. I lay among the destroyed memories of Louis, feeling more trapped than ever, but I knew the truth now, and I wouldn't let them bury it again. The next morning, my parents announced we were having an intervention. Louis's parents would be there, along with some concerned community members. I tried to refuse, but they literally carried me to the living room where everyone was already gathered. Louis's mother was sobbing before anyone even spoke. "How could you defend that woman?" she wailed. "She killed my baby, my only son." "Mrs. Patterson, she tried to save him. There's video proof that the warning signs were removed." Louis's father slammed his hand on the coffee table. "Stop spreading her lies. You're dishonoring Louis's memory. He was your best friend. How can you betray him like this? But as Mrs. Patterson cried, I noticed something strange. She kept glancing toward Salem's house through the window. It wasn't a look of anger or hatred. It looked like guilt. The intervention continued for hours. Each person told me how disappointed they were, how I was being brainwashed, how I needed help. When it finally ended, my parents locked me in my room again. That night, I heard a soft scratching sound coming from the heating vent. I pressed my ear against it and heard Emma's voice. Emma was Lewis's younger sister, only 10 years old. I believe you, she whispered through the vent. I've seen Salem at Lewis's grave too. She leaves his favorite candy and fresh sunflowers. Emma, your parents will be furious if they find out you're talking to me. I don't care. I found something you need to see. Mom threw it away, but I grabbed it from the trash. It's a USB drive that came in a letter addressed to you, from Salem. She managed to push the small drive through the vent slots. I already made a copy, she whispered, just in case. The next day, my parents presented the original letter and USB drive to me, making a show of destroying both in front of my eyes. More lies and manipulation, my mother said, as she snapped the drive in half. This ends now, but they didn't know about Emma's copy. That night, I used my old laptop to view the contents. It was the same video Salem had shown me, but clearer. This time, I could make out faces. The police chief's brother was there, yes, but so were other prominent community members. They were laughing as they tore down the signs, joking about how the city was making their kids soft. There was also a scanned document, a report from a lake safety inspector dated the day before the drowning. It warned that the ice was dangerously thin and recommended closing the lake entirely. Someone had written, "Denied, kids need to toughen up" across it in red ink. I was studying the files when Tyler knocked on my door. He came in looking uncomfortable, followed by a man I recognized as Brady, the youth group leader from church. "Your parents asked me to talk to you," Brady said with a practiced smile. "They're very concerned about your spiritual well-being." For an hour, Brady talked about forgiveness, moving on, and the dangers of being led astray. But near the end, he made a mistake. "Your parents have been so generous," he said. "They've been donating extra to the church, even paying me and others to help increase community awareness about the Salem situation. We need to make sure she understands she's not welcome here anymore. Maybe if enough pressure is applied, she'll finally move away before anyone discovers, well, before she causes more trouble." He caught himself, but it was too late. I'd heard enough. After they left, I confronted Tyler. "You know the truth, don't you? About the signs?" He wouldn't look at me. "Sometimes the truth isn't what's important. Sometimes protecting your family is." "Lewis was family too." "Lewis is dead," Tyler snapped, "and nothing we do will bring him back." 2 days later, my parents made an announcement at dinner. "We're moving," my dad said. "Out of state. Fresh start for everyone. We leave in 1 week." "You can't just run away from this." "We're not running," my mom insisted. "We've been planning this for months. The anniversary of the drowning is coming up, and it's too painful to stay here." But I knew the real reason. Every year on the anniversary, Salem tried to tell her story at the town memorial. Every year, she was shouted down or removed. This year would be different if the video got out. That night, Emma slipped something else through the vent. "I found this in your dad's study," she whispered. "It's his journal from that year." I opened it with shaking hands and found the entry from the day of the drowning. March 15th. "What have we done? We removed the barriers and signs because we thought the kids needed to learn to be careful on their own. Natural consequences, Tom called it. But now 3 boys are dead. Salem tried to warn us. She tried to save them all. We're telling everyone she must have removed the signs herself, that she wanted this to happen. It's easier than admitting we culled those children with our pride. The guilt is eating me alive. But if the truth comes out, we'll go to prison. I have to protect my family. I'm sorry, Lewis. I'm so sorry." I stared at my father's handwriting until the words blurred together. The journal entry confirmed everything Salem had shown me, but seeing it in my dad's own words made it real in a way that shook me to my core. 3 boys were dead because adults wanted to teach them a lesson about being tough. Emma's voice came through the vent again. "There's more. Keep reading." I flipped through the pages, finding entry after entry documenting the cover-up. My father wrote about secret meetings, about threatening witnesses, about the relief when Salem became the scapegoat. The most recent entry was from just last week. "She knows. My own child knows. We have to leave before the truth destroys us all." The sound of footsteps in the hallway made me quickly hide the journal under my mattress. My door opened and Tyler stood there, holding a suitcase. "Start packing," he said. "Mom wants everything ready by tomorrow." "Tyler, please. You have to see this journal." Dad admits. "I don't want to know." Tyler's voice cracked. "Can't you understand? If this gets out, Dad goes to prison. Mom too, probably. Is that what you want? What about what Louis would want? What about justice?" Tyler set down the suitcase hard. "Lewis is gone, but we're still here. We're your family." After he left, I sat on my bed, surrounded by boxes I was supposed to fill. Through my window, I could see Salem's house. A single light burned in her kitchen window. She'd been alone for years, blamed for something she tried to prevent, while the real culprits lived normal lives. The next morning brought chaos. Moving trucks arrived early, and my parents supervised as workers loaded furniture. I was confined to my room, supposedly packing, but really planning. Emma had slipped me a screwdriver through the vent during the night, and I'd managed to loosen the bolts on the window frame. Not enough to escape yet, but enough to work on later. My mom came in around noon, her eyes red from crying. "I know this is hard," she said, sitting on my bed, "but sometimes families have to make difficult choices to stay stay together. Like lying about how 3 children died? Her face hardened. You don't understand what it was like. The panic, the fear. We never meant for anyone to get hurt, but when they did get hurt, you all chose to blame Salem instead of taking responsibility. She stood abruptly. Salem should have been watching them better. If she'd done her job, she tried to save them, while you and Dad and everyone else just stood there. Enough, Mom's voice echoed off the walls. You will pack your things, you will get in that truck tomorrow, and you will never mention this again. Do you understand? She left before I could answer, locking the door behind her. I heard her crying in the hallway, heard my dad comforting her, heard them both agreeing that leaving was the only option. That afternoon, Brady returned with several other church members. They gathered in our living room for what they called a blessing for the journey, but I could hear them through the floor. They were really discussing Salem. Once they're gone, we can really put pressure on her, someone said. Without the kids stirring up trouble, she'll have no choice but to leave. The anniversary is in 3 days, Brady added. We'll make sure she doesn't get anywhere near that memorial. I pressed my ear to the floor, trying to hear more, when my door suddenly opened. Tyler stood there with a plate of sandwiches. Mom thought you might be hungry, he said, but his eyes went to where I was crouched by the floor. What are you doing? Nothing. Just dropped something. He set the plate down slowly. You know, I remember that day at the lake. I was supposed to go too, but I had a basketball game. I've always wondered if I'd been there. You couldn't have changed anything, Tyler. Maybe not, but I could have told the truth afterward. He paused at the door. I'm not brave like you. I can't lose them, even if they're wrong. That evening, as the sun set, I worked on the window bolts with renewed determination. Emma had been quiet all day, but just after dark, she whispered through the vent. My mom's been acting strange. She keeps looking at that USB drive copy I made. I think she might watch it. Emma, be careful. If your parents find out you've been helping me, I don't care anymore. Louis was my brother. He deserves better than lies. I heard footsteps above her, and she went silent. I returned to the window, finally getting 1 bolt completely free. 3 more to go. Around midnight, I heard a car pull up outside. Peeking through the window, I saw Mrs. Patterson getting out of her car at Salem's house. She stood at the door for a long moment before knocking. When Salem answered, Mrs. Patterson fell to her knees, sobbing. I couldn't hear what was said, but I watched Salem help her inside. They stayed in the kitchen, 2 women connected by tragedy, finally talking after years of lies. The next morning, moving day, my parents were frantic. The truck was loaded, but they kept checking their phones, whispering urgently. Something had them spooked. Tyler came to get me, finding me still working on the window. It's time to go. I'm not leaving. You don't have a choice. But he didn't sound convinced. Mom's really scared. Mrs. Patterson didn't come home last night. She's at Salem's house. I saw her go there. Tyler's face went pale. Oh no. If she tells Salem about the other parents involved, she already knows Tyler. She's always known. She just never had anyone to back her up. We heard shouting from downstairs. My dad's voice, angry and desperate. We're leaving now. Tyler grabbed my arm, but I pulled away. You can go. I'm staying. They'll drag you to that truck. Let them try. Let the whole neighborhood see them forcing me to leave. See how that looks. Tyler stared at me for a long moment, then made a decision. He pulled out his phone and started recording. If they're going to drag you, at least there'll be evidence. My parents burst into the room, both looking haggard. We're going, Dad said. Get up. No, this isn't a debate. He moved toward me but stopped when he saw Tyler recording. Put that away, Mom demanded. No, Tyler said quietly. I think we've had enough cover-ups in this family. The doorbell rang downstairs, echoing through the house. We all froze. It rang again, more insistent. Dad went to answer it while Mom watched me like I might disappear. We heard voices, getting louder. Then footsteps on the stairs. Many footsteps. Mrs. Patterson appeared in my doorway, her face streaked with tears, but determined. Behind her were other parents, including the Hendersons and the Martins. All had lost children that day. We need to talk, Mrs. Patterson said to my parents. All of us. The truth needs to come out. This is ridiculous, my dad started, but Mrs. Patterson cut him off. I watched the video. I saw what really happened. I saw you all tearing down those signs. Her voice broke. My baby died because we thought we knew better than safety warnings. You don't understand, my mom pleaded. If this comes out, then we face the consequences, Mr. Martin said, stepping forward. I'm tired of living with this guilt, tired of blaming an innocent woman. She's not innocent, my dad shouted. She was supposed to watch them. She tried to save them, Mrs. Henderson said quietly. While we all stood there in shock, she went into that water over and over. I still have nightmares about it. The room erupted in arguments, accusations, and tears. In the chaos, I slipped past everyone and ran downstairs. The front door was open, the moving truck still running. I sprinted across the yard toward Salem's house. I burst through her door without knocking, finding her in the kitchen with Emma. They both looked up, unsurprised. They're all here, I gasped. The parents. They're finally talking about what really happened. Salem nodded slowly. I know. Mrs. Patterson told me everything last night. She looked older than ever, but there was something like peace in her eyes. I've waited 6 years for this day. What do we do now? Now? Salem stood, straightening her white lace shawl. Now we go to the memorial. It's time everyone heard the truth. We walked back to my house together, Salem moving with quiet dignity despite her age. The argument was still raging in my room, but it stopped when we appeared in the doorway. My parents stared at Salem like they'd seen a ghost. She looked at each parent in turn, her gaze steady and sad. I forgive you, she said simply. All of you. You were scared and made a terrible choice, but these years of letting me carry your guilt, that has to end today. My mom collapsed into a chair, sobbing. Dad stood frozen, his face a mask of shame and fear. The other parents looked equally stricken. The memorial is tomorrow, Salem continued. You can either come and tell the truth, or I'll tell it alone. But either way, the truth will be told. We'll go to prison, my dad whispered. Maybe, Salem said. Or maybe the courts will show mercy. But living in prison can't be worse than living with this lie. Brady appeared at the top of the stairs, probably coming to see what the commotion was about. He took one look at the scene and tried to back away, but Tyler blocked his path. Going somewhere? Tyler asked. I think you should stay. After all, you've been so invested in the Salem situation. Brady's practiced smile faltered. I don't know what you mean. Really? I pulled out my phone, showing the recording Emma had helped me make of his earlier comments. Because it sounds like you've been paid to harass an elderly woman. The room turned on Brady, parents demanding to know who had paid him. He stammered, pointed at my parents, and tried to explain it was just about encouraging her to move. Nothing illegal. Get out, Mrs. Patterson said coldly. And if I see you near Salem again, I'll call the police myself. Brady fled, and the room fell silent again. Salem turned to leave, but stopped at the door. The memorial is at 10 tomorrow morning. I hope to see you all there. She looked directly at me. Thank you for believing in the truth, even when it cost you everything. After she left, the parents continued talking in hushed voices. Plans were made, lawyers were called, and slowly, the weight of 6 years began to lift. My parents sat apart from the others, holding each other and crying. Tyler came to sit beside me on the stairs. I'm sorry, he said, for everything, for helping them watch you, for not standing up sooner. You're standing up now. That's what matters. He smiled sadly. Louis would be proud of you. You did what none of us adults could do. That night, the moving truck sat empty in our driveway. My parents had sent it away, deciding to face whatever came next. I finally removed the last bolt from my window, but didn't need to escape anymore. Emma called through the vent one last time. My parents are going to the memorial tomorrow. They're going to tell the truth about the signs. Mine too. All of them are. Do you think Salem will really forgive them? I thought about Salem's eyes, the sadness and strength in them. She already has. She's been waiting for them to forgive themselves. The next morning dawned clear and cold, reminding me of that day 6 years ago. The whole town seemed to be heading to the memorial, word having spread overnight that something important was happening. Salem stood at the front, wearing her best white lace dress. One by one, the parents who had been at the lake that day came forward. They told the truth about removing the signs, about the cover-up, about letting Salem take the blame. My father spoke last, his voice breaking as he read the names of the 3 boys who died. Louis Patterson, Marcus Henderson, Jamie Martin. We failed you, and we're sorry. The crowd was silent, processing the revelation. Some looked angry, others shocked. But when Salem stepped forward to speak, everyone listened. I've tended their graves for 6 years, she said. Not because I was guilty, but because they deserved to be remembered by someone who knew the truth. Today, I can finally share that burden with others. She looked at me in the crowd and smiled. A child's courage reminded us that truth matters more than comfort, that justice delayed is still worth pursuing. After the memorial, the police took statements. Lawyers were consulted. The future was uncertain for many of the parents, including mine. But there was relief too, the kind that comes from finally putting down a weight you've carried too long. That afternoon, I helped Salem plant new flowers in her garden. The community that had shunned her for years now brought food, apologies, and offers of help. She accepted it all graciously, but I could see she was tired. Will you stay? I asked, now that everyone knows the truth. Where would I go? She said, patting the soil around a sunflower. This is my home. Those boys are buried here. Someone needs to tend their graves. Not alone anymore, I promised. Tyler joined us, rolling up his sleeves to help. Then Emma and her parents. Soon, Salem's garden was full of people planting flowers, rebuilding what had been destroyed. My parents watched from our porch, still too ashamed to join, but not trying to stop me anymore. They had their own path to walk now, legal consequences to face, but at least they were facing them with truth instead of lies. As the sun set, Salem's grandson Neil arrived. He'd stayed away for years, unable to bear the hostility toward his grandmother. But news of the truth had reached him, and he'd come home. I watched them embrace, both crying, and felt something like peace. Louis was still gone. Nothing could change that. But his memory was no longer tangled in lies, and the woman who'd tried to save him was finally free. That night, I found my dad's journal and gave it to him. You should burn this, I said. Start fresh. He took it with shaking hands. I'm proud of you, he whispered, and ashamed of myself. I don't know how to fix this. Start by helping Salem's garden grow. Louis loved sunflowers. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. Mom joined us, and we stood together, a family fractured but not broken, ready to rebuild with truth as our foundation. The next weeks brought investigations, community meetings, and legal proceedings. Some parents faced charges, others community service. My family stayed, choosing to face the consequences rather than run. I helped Salem with her garden every day after school, but the tension at home grew unbearable. My parents barely spoke to me, and when they did, it was only about practical matters. The community remained divided, with some supporting Salem and others still clinging to the old lies. One afternoon, while I was watering Salem's sunflowers, a black sedan pulled up outside. A woman in a business suit stepped out, carrying a briefcase. She walked straight to Salem's door. Salem invited her in, and I followed curiously. The woman introduced herself herself as Victoria Chen, an attorney specializing in wrongful persecution cases. She'd heard about Salem's story through social media posts that had started circulating after the memorial. "I'd like to represent you pro bono," Victoria said, spreading documents across Salem's kitchen table. "What happened to you constitutes defamation, harassment, and discrimination. You have grounds for civil action." Salem shook her head gently. "I don't want their money. I just wanted the truth." "This isn't about money," Victoria explained. "It's about establishing legal precedent, making sure this doesn't happen to someone else." I watched Salem consider this, her weathered hands folded in her lap. Finally, she nodded. "If it helps others, then yes." That evening, my parents received their first legal notice. I heard Dad on the phone with his lawyer, voice strained. Mom paced the kitchen, wringing her hands. Tyler sat at the dining table, head in his hands. "They're suing everyone involved," Dad said after hanging up. "Not just for defamation, but for conspiracy to commit fraud. The cover-up makes it worse. We should have left when we had the chance," Mom muttered. "Running would have made us look guilty," Tyler said. "We are guilty." I couldn't help but interject from the doorway. They all turned to look at me. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Dad's shoulders sagged. "Yes, we are." The next few days brought a parade of lawyers to our house. Each meeting left my parents looking more defeated. Their savings would be decimated by legal fees alone, not counting any potential settlements or criminal fines. Emma continued passing me updates through the vent. Her parents were cooperating fully with investigators, turning over emails and text messages from 6 years ago. The evidence was damning. Mom found the group chat, Emma whispered one night, where all the parents planned what to say after the drowning. "Your dad wrote the script for blaming Salem." My stomach churned. Each revelation made it harder to look at my parents. They'd not only caused those deaths through negligence, but orchestrated an elaborate lie that destroyed an innocent woman's life. Brady was arrested 3 days later. The investigation revealed he'd been paid not just by my parents, but by several others to organize harassment campaigns. He'd recruited teenagers to vandalize Salem's property and spread rumors on social media. I was at Salem's house when the news broke. She simply nodded, unsurprised. "Young people are easily influenced by authority figures," she said. "I don't blame the children he recruited." Her grandson Neil had been staying with her since the memorial. He worked on converting the old tablet videos to clearer formats, creating a comprehensive timeline of events. Tech-savvy and determined, he built a website documenting everything. "Grandma tried to save them all," Neil told me as we reviewed the footage again. "She went under 3 times for Louis alone, nearly drowned herself." The video showed Salem's desperate efforts in painful detail. While parents stood frozen on shore, she'd battled the freezing water repeatedly. The timestamp showed she'd spent nearly 20 minutes in the lake, long after any reasonable person would have given up. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. "Family meeting, now." I found my parents and Tyler in the living room. Mom had been crying again, her face blotchy and swollen. Dad looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past week. "We've made a decision," Dad began. "We're going to plead guilty to everything, take responsibility. Our lawyer says we're looking at possible jail time," Mom added, voice hollow. "But fighting it would be worse. Longer sentences if we're convicted at trial." Tyler cleared his throat. "I've been talking to the prosecutor. If I testify about what I know, what I saw growing up, they might reduce your sentences." "No," Dad said firmly. "You weren't involved in the original incident. Don't sacrifice your future for our mistakes." "I helped cover it up later," Tyler argued. "I monitored my own sibling to protect your lies. I'm involved whether you like it or not." The argument continued, but I slipped away. Their legal strategies weren't my concern anymore. I had my own path to follow. At school, the divide was obvious. Some kids supported me for standing up for Salem. Others, whose parents were implicated, treated me like a traitor. Emma faced similar treatment, but remained steadfast. "They can hate us all they want," she said during lunch. "We did the right thing." The Hendersons were the first to take a plea deal. They admitted to removing the warning signs and participating in the cover-up. In exchange for their cooperation, they received probation and community service. The Martins followed suit days later. My parents held out longer, hoping for a better deal. But as more evidence emerged, their position weakened. The journal entries were particularly damaging, showing clear consciousness of guilt. One evening, while my parents met with lawyers again, I found Tyler in his room packing boxes. "I'm moving out," he said without looking up. "Got a job offer in another state. I can't watch this anymore." "You're abandoning them?" He finally met my eyes. "I'm saving myself. You should think about doing the same." "I'm 17. I can't just leave." "Emma's parents offered to let you stay with them," Tyler revealed. "They feel guilty about their role in all this. They want to help." I stared at him, processing this information. Living with Lewis's family? The idea felt both wrong and right simultaneously. That night, I knocked on Emma's window. She opened it immediately, like she'd been expecting me. "Your parents really offered to take me in?" She nodded. "Mom says you're the only reason the truth came out. She wants to make amends. What about you? Would it be weird having me there?" Emma smiled sadly. "Lewis would have wanted us to stick together. He always said you were like another sibling to him." The decision tormented me for days. My parents needed support, but they'd also created this situation. Staying felt like endorsing their actions, but leaving felt like abandonment. Salem helped me find clarity during one of our gardening sessions. "Sometimes protecting yourself isn't selfish," she said while pruning dead blooms. "You can't save people who won't save themselves, but they're my parents, and they failed you, just as those parents failed their children at the lake." She paused paused, considering her words. Love doesn't mean accepting harmful behavior. You can love them and still choose distance. Victoria Chen called a meeting of all affected parties. The conference room at the community center was packed. Salem sat at the front, dignified as always. The parents who'd participated in the cover-up clustered together, looking diminished. I've consulted with Salem, Victoria announced. She's willing to settle the civil suits under certain conditions. The room held its breath. First, full public acknowledgement of what happened. Second, establishment of a water safety fund in the boys' names. Third, mandatory community service focused on water safety education. Fourth, a formal apology ceremony where each of you personally apologizes to Salem. That's it? Mr. Henderson asked, surprised. No financial damages? Salem doesn't want your money, Victoria replied. She wants prevention of future tragedies and restoration of her reputation. The parents exchanged glances. This was far more lenient than they'd expected or deserved. However, Victoria continued, this only covers civil matters. Criminal charges are up to the prosecutor. The meeting dissolved into smaller groups discussing the proposal. I watched my parents huddle with their lawyer, gesturing animatedly. They seemed relieved but wary. Mrs. Patterson approached me afterward. Have you thought about our offer? I glanced at my parents, still deep in legal discussion. Yes, I'll move in next week. She hugged me tightly. Louis would be so proud of you for standing up for what's right. Telling my parents was harder than I'd anticipated. Mom cried, begged me to reconsider. Dad went silent, staring at the wall, but neither tried to stop me. They knew they'd lost the moral authority to make demands. This is because of her, isn't it? Mom said bitterly. Salem turned you against us. No, I replied firmly. You did that yourselves when you chose lies over truth. Tyler helped me pack. He'd delayed his departure to see me settled. As we boxed up my belongings, he shared something that surprised me. I knew about the signs, he admitted. Not at first, but I figured it out years ago. The stories didn't add up, but I was too scared to say anything. Why tell me now? Because you were braver at 17 than I am at 23. You deserve to know you're not crazy for seeing the truth. Moving day arrived faster than expected. The Patterson house felt strange, but welcoming. Emma had cleared out half her room for me, even though they had a spare bedroom. I thought you might not want to be alone at first, she explained shyly. That first night, I lay in the unfamiliar bed listening to Emma's breathing. Through the window, I could see Salem's house, porch light glowing warmly. For the first time in months, I felt something like hope. The apology ceremony took place on a gray Tuesday morning. The community center was packed again, but this time with supporters of Salem. She sat in the front row, hands folded, expression serene. One by one, the parents approached the microphone. Their apologies varied in sincerity and length, but Salem received each with the same quiet grace. My parents went last. Dad's voice shook as he spoke. I orchestrated a lie that destroyed an innocent woman's life. I let my fear and pride override my conscience. Salem, I'm deeply sorry for the pain we caused you. Mom could barely get through her apology, crying too hard to be clearly understood, but she tried, and Salem nodded acknowledgement. After the ceremony, Salem stood to address the crowd. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, she said. It's choosing to release the poison of anger. I forgive not for them, but for myself, and for the memory of those 3 boys who deserved better from all of us. The criminal trials began 2 months later. My parents both pled guilty to reduced charges, receiving 18 months probation and 500 hours of community service. Others received similar sentences. No one went to jail, which angered some community members, but seemed to satisfy Salem. Prison wouldn't bring the boys back, she told me, but maybe this service will prevent other tragedies. The Water Safety Fund grew quickly, with donations pouring in from across the state. The story had spread beyond our small town, touching others who'd lost children to preventable drownings. Salem was appointed to the board, finally having a voice in protecting children. I testified at several hearings, describing what I'd witnessed and discovered. Each time felt like betraying my parents, but also like honoring Lewis's memory. Emma sat in the gallery during every testimony, silent support that meant everything. Neil started a documentary about the case, interviewing everyone willing to talk. Even some parents participated, trying to explain how groupthink and fear had led them down such a dark path. The film would eventually premiere at a regional festival, winning awards for its unflinching look at community complicity. Life with the Pattersons settled into a rhythm. Mrs. Patterson treated me like her own child, while Mr. Patterson helped with homework and college applications. Emma and I grew closer, bonded by shared loss and shared courage. I still saw my parents weekly, awkward dinners where we struggled for conversation. They were different people now, hollowed out by guilt and consequences. But they were trying, attending therapy and completing their service hours diligently. Tyler visited once before moving permanently. He pulled me aside during dinner at the Pattersons. I'm proud of you, he said simply. You saved Salem when none of us adults could. I just told the truth. Sometimes that's the hardest thing in the world. Salem's garden bloomed magnificently that summer. The whole community helped tend it now, a living memorial to the boys and testament to resilience. She taught neighborhood children about plants, sharing wisdom accumulated over decades. During one gardening session, she handed me an envelope. Inside was a letter of recommendation for college. You'll need this for applications, she said. I wrote about your courage and integrity, qualities any school would value. I hugged her then, feeling the fragility of her aging aged frame, but also the strength that had sustained her through years of injustice. The anniversary of the drowning came around again. This time, the memorial was different. Salem stood at the podium as an honored speaker, not a pariah. She spoke about water safety, about community responsibility, about the danger of convenient lies. These boys died because adults failed them, she said, but their deaths can serve as a warning, a reminder that our children deserve truth and protection, not pride and negligence. The water safety program launched that fall, mandatory for all elementary students in the district. Parents were required to attend orientation sessions, learning about ice conditions and warning signs. Salem often spoke at these sessions, her presence a powerful reminder of consequences. My college acceptance letters started arriving in spring, good schools offering partial scholarships. The Patterson family celebrated each one, Emma joking about following me wherever I went. "You can't escape me," she teased. "We're family now," and we were, not by blood, but by choice and circumstance. The Pattersons had given me what my own parents couldn't, a home built on truth rather than lies. Graduation day arrived with typical fanfare. My parents attended, sitting separately from the Pattersons but present nonetheless. Salem came too, bringing Neil and wearing her finest white lace dress. As I walked across the stage, I thought about Louis, how he should have been graduating too, maybe heading to the same college. But his death hadn't been meaningless. It had eventually brought truth and change, even if the path had been painful. After the ceremony, Salem pulled me aside. "I have something for you," she said, pressing a small wrapped package into my hands. Inside was a silver locket containing a pressed sunflower petal. "From my garden," she explained, "to remember that beautiful things can grow from terrible circumstances." The summer passed quickly, filled with preparation for college and final moments in the town that had shaped me. I spent hours in Salem's garden, absorbing last bits of wisdom and peace. Tyler returned for my going-away party, looking healthier and happier. He'd found peace in distance, building a life untainted by our family's sins. He encouraged me to do the same. "Don't feel guilty for moving forward," he advised. "We can't live in the shadow of their mistakes forever." My parents came to say goodbye the night before I left. The conversation was stilted but sincere. They wished me well, promised to write, and didn't ask me to forgive them. They knew that was a journey I'd have to take on my own time.